In Genesis 40, we find Joseph in exile in Egypt, the forerunner of Israel's Egyptian exile, which in turn necessitated the coming of Moses as Redeemer. Notice that both Joseph and Moses are types of Christ in this saga. Moses recorded the true history of Joseph as a prophecy for Israel in the Exodus, and in this pericope we see it prophesying of Jesus as well. Genesis 40, verse 12. Then Joseph said to him, this is its interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office, and you shall place Pharaoh's cup in his hand as formerly, when you were his cupbearer. Verse 15. For I was indeed stolen out of the hand of the Hebrews, and here also I have done nothing that they should put me into the pit. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was favorable, he said to Moses, I also had a dream. Verse 19. In 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat the flesh of you. On the 3rd day he restored the chief cupbearer to his position, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, as Joseph had interpreted to them. Genesis 40:12 and various verses through 22. The cupbearer or wine steward and the baker have been cast down into the pit, as Jonas says of his time in the belly of the fish, and there they await their fate. Joseph, too, is in this pit, representing Israel stolen out of their land, and he is suffering innocently, as will true Israel, Jesus. In John, Jesus has said in his final discourse with the disciples that he will not drink wine after the Last Supper until he drinks it again in the kingdom of God. The 3-day motif has been seen to refer, especially in reference to Mount Sinai, as a period of preparation to meet with God, or even in the case of Jeroboam and Rehoboam, or Haman and Artaxerxes, to come before the earthly king. We saw that in John 2, this referred to Jesus, where his revealing at the Wedding Feast of Cana is said to have occurred on the 3rd day. With very little reference to what that period entailed, the reader's attention was drawn to the accounting of the day itself. Jesus' miracle of turning water into wine was shown to be an announcement of his ministry, a demonstration of his power and identity, and also a prophetic hint about Israel's judgment to come. One reference to judgment, along with the consummation in the wedding feast, came as we saw it tied in allusion to the Lamb's High Feast, where the birds of the air would feed upon the carcasses of Jesus' enemies. This passage in Genesis makes a similar reference to the death of the baker and the fate of his body. Coupled as an inclusio with the wine at the Last Supper, the wine of the wedding feast combines all of these with the prophecy of his coming resurrection, here on the fulfilling 3rd day. Jesus is the real wine steward at the wedding feast, not just dispensing the new wine, but also creating it. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he is the cupbearer who willingly takes on its curses and then passes it on. In the Joseph story in Genesis 40, the cupbearer is the one restored to his former position, as is Jesus restored to physical life. The cupbearer is the one, on the 3rd day, who is raised up and enters the courts again. He enters the kingdom. For the cupbearer in Joseph's story, he is being raised up into Pharaoh's inner circle again, where he can prepare for the redemption of Joseph from prison. For Jesus, the restoration is to the kingdom, where he said he would drink again of the fruit of the vine, and where he will go behind the curtain to prepare a way for all of his followers. He will return to where John started us off in the prologue, where the Logos was in the beginning with God. On that same 3rd day of restoration for the wine steward, however, the baker was judged and executed. Redemption and rescue are always coupled with judgment. John has not spoken specifically of the leaven of the Pharisees, but the synoptic gospels did, and John has echoed them in their condemnation of these religious hypocrites, whose leaven the disciples were to beware. At the Last Supper, another, even more immediate enemy is seen in the company of King Jesus and sharing bread with him. Jesus gave the dip bread to Judas Iscariot, and after he had taken the morsel, Satan entered him. John 13:27. Judas killed himself, like the baker who was hung from a tree. But Satan, the ultimate liar and spreader of leaven, was judged, defeated, and cast down, never to return to the court of the king, where he had been seen many times throughout the Bible. After this incident, Joseph, as a type of Christ, came into Pharaoh's service at 30 years of age, and he ran the kingdom for him. When Jesus came to announce his kingdom, his mother Mary told those at the wedding feast to do whatever he tells you in John 2:5. Again, what seems like an odd bit of information for the gospel writer to include makes perfect sense when we refer to the writings of Moses and recall that Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph. What he says to you, do." Genesis 4:55. I think it's clear that John has wanted us to see the parallels in these events and to see Jesus in the types and the prophecies. Notice that in order to understand this gospel, we have to return to its beginning with information we pick up at the end, which is just how we have to read the whole Bible and all of redemptive history.